what makes Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Navy special. Hello friends, this is Vaibhav Purandare here. In this new video of mine, I'm going to talk about what makes Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj's Navy special and why is he regarded as the father of the Indian National Navy. I'm going to answer that question. To answer that question, we first need to go to the times of the Cholas. And that's especially important today because in recent times, the Indian Navy has adopted a new emblem in honor of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. What happened at the time of the Cholas? As we know, the Cholas had famously built their own navy and they crossed the seas and went into Southeast Asia, into Indonesia and other places. They were real conquerors and they were famous for their navy. The Chola Empire was extinguished by the mid 1250s. After that, for about 4.5-5 centuries, Indian rulers, Indian states did not pay any attention to the seas at all. The result of all of that was that when Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj was born in 1630 and during the early years of his youth, the vast Indian coastline was dominated by 4 foreign powers. They were the British, they were the Dutch, French, and they were the Portuguese. These 4 foreign powers controlled India's massive coastline. And in parts there were the African Siddhis as well, especially on the western coast, in places like Janjira. So what were the Mughals doing? The Mughals had not built their own navy. What were the Deccani states doing? Whether it was the Nizam Shahi of Ahmednagar, the Adil Shahi of Bijapur, the Qutub Shahi of Golconda, or other states of that period, nobody had bothered to build their own navy and nobody had paid attention to the vast coastline. So if the family of, say, the Mughal emperor or the Bijapuri Badshah wanted to go to Mecca on a religious pilgrimage, they needed to get licenses from the British and the Portuguese and the Dutch on the western coast in order to take a ship, a boat, to go to Mecca. For their trading activities, they similarly needed to get permissions from all these foreign powers. These 3 foreign powers on the western coast and the French were on the eastern coast. They granted licenses to the local Indian powers that were there on the land. Chhatrapati Shivaji arrives on the scene and he recognizes very early in his youth that the sea is important in terms of both defense and trade. So what does he do? In his late 20s, he is born in the year 1630 and in the year 1656-59, he starts building his own naval fleet. He starts by focusing on the areas of Kalyan, Bhiwandi, which are very close to Mumbai on the western coast, and he starts using his naval fleet there. Now he does not have any fleet of his own, so he starts building vessels there in Kalyan, Dombivli and other places on the western coast. Slowly he builds his own naval fleet. By the year 1674, by which time Shivaji is 44 years old, he has succeeded in building 50 armed vessels, that is, vessels for combat. And how does he build those vessels? The Marathas, Chhatrapati Shivaji, do not have naval technology. They do not have sophisticated naval technology. The sophisticated technology is with the western powers. So what does Shivaji do? He employs Portuguese naval engineers to build his naval vessels and ships. And how does he do that? He pays them a lot of money. So in the British factory records, for example, there are complaints made by British officials on the western coast, whether it's at Rajapur or Surat and other places where the British had their factories. East India Company had its factories. Officials from the factory are writing to officials in London or writing to each other that their own naval engineers have moved and some of them have moved and have started working for Shivaji. And why is that so? They are worried because they say he's paying them more and he's getting them to build vessels for himself. He systematically goes about building his vessels. The Mughal power also writes to the British and the Portuguese saying it's worried that their engineers are working for Shivaji, and the British and the Portuguese say, well, we have nothing to do with it because they are not employees of the company. They are engineers we have employed for a particular purpose, but now they are choosing to work with Shivaji because he is building his own fleet. So very intelligently, very cleverly, he starts building his fleet. What does he do at the same time? At the same time, he starts training the Kori fishermen and others on the coast, other communities on the coast, the Bhandaris, for example, who live along the coastline on the west. to build their own ships with the help of better technology. Now the Koris and the Bhandaris already have their naval vessels. How could they get better vessels? And how could these vessels be used for defense and many of them for trade as well? He starts training them in this regard. So on the one hand, he starts getting this new technology, building sophisticated vessels, and on the other hand, in order to ensure that the indigenous people, the local people ultimately have the benefit of the technology and also know how to use this technology, he starts training them as well. In this manner, he starts building his navy, and by the year 1674, he's got 50 vessels for combat and around 700 trading vessels. Now these trading vessels are not all built by him or by his men, but many of these trading vessels have been hired, many have been bought over from the others, but he's got and he's trading with countries even in Western Asia. What makes Shivaji special? He's the only one among his contemporaries across the subcontinent in the 17th century to recognize the significance of the seas in terms of defense and trade. And he starts achieving power on the naval side, on the coastline, power which will ultimately go away from the Western powers and come over to the Indian side. What the Mughals have ignored and what everybody else has ignored, he has realized and he has recognized, and he is building his fleet. He is building his fleet at a time when he has tremendous challenges even on the land. From the Mughals, from Bijapur, from the Qutub Shahi, he demonstrates the vision which nobody has shown after the collapse of the Chola Empire to build a naval fleet of his own. In one very significant respect, he also differs from the Cholas, and that too makes him very special. How is that? The Cholas, for instance, had the origins of their empire in a river valley. What does that mean? That means they had an intrinsic awareness of the importance of the waters. In contrast, where does Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj come from? He comes from the Deccan. He comes from the Sahyadri mountain ranges. He does not have an inner awareness of the waters unlike the Cholas, but he has the vision. So from the Deccan mountains, from the Sahyadri mountain ranges and the Deccan plateau, he systematically moves to the west towards the coastline. And what does he ultimately do? He ultimately builds his capital, Raigad, close to the Konkan coastline. Now this demonstrates an extraordinary vision, a vision which no other ruler of the time had, a vision which no one had demonstrated in the past 500 years, a vision which all the Indian powers and all the others also who had set up their base here after having come in from overseas, that is people like the Mughals, they too had not recognized the importance of the waters. But Chhatrapati Shivaji did. And at the same time that he was carrying out his political revolution and rebellion against the Mughals and against Bijapur and other forces on land, he was building his naval fleet simultaneously. That makes him special, and that is why he is recognized as the father of the Indian Navy. That is what also distinguishes him from the Cholas. For a long time there has been this question that, okay, if we were to regard Shivaji as the father of the Indian Navy, then why don't we regard the Cholas as the real progenitors of the Indian Navy? Well, they were, there's no question about that. But Shivaji was special because he came after 500 years of subjugation, 500 years of slavery, and he demonstrates foresight and farsightedness that nobody has done for 500 years. And after that, in a sense, the indigenous people, the local people of India get into naval activity in a major way, and that their activity continues up until the time India gains freedom and gets her own national navy in 1947. I've written extensively about Chhatrapati Shivaji and his navy and about Chhatrapati Shivaji's life as a whole in my new book, which is a biography of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, and it's been published by Juggernaut Books. Pick up a copy if you want to know more about the life of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. Thank you, dear friends. Thanks for listening to this video and seeing this video, and I'll be back soon with another one. Until then, if you haven't subscribed yet, do subscribe to my YouTube channel and press the bell button so you get notifications. Thank you very much.